When our mother died, I thought grief would bring my brother and me closer. Instead, it exposed the rot beneath our family's surface. At her funeral, while I was still trembling from loss, he told relatives I was unstable, emotional, erratic, unfit. I chalked it up to stress. But 2 weeks later, I discovered he had secretly transferred the deed of our family home into his name alone. The house we grew up in. The house she left to both of us. As I unravel his lies, I begin to realize. This wasn't just a moment of greed, it was part of something bigger. Something he'd planned long before she even died. And now, if I want justice, I'll have to prove my own sanity, while everything around me starts to fall apart. Hadn't spoken to my brother in almost 4 months before the funeral. Not because of a fight, not even because of distance, just silence. The kind that grows like mold after our mother got sick. I was the one who stayed. Who took unpaid leave. Who learned how to inject her morphine when the hospice nurses weren't around. He sent flowers once. Called twice. And yet, when he walked into the church that morning in his tailored navy suit, he looked like the grieving son from a movie. Like he was carrying the weight of the world. I remember watching him shake hands, nod solemnly, even pat a few shoulders. He caught my eye once and gave me this small, rehearsed smile. The kind people wear when they're already 10 steps ahead of you. Should have known then. After the service, everyone gathered in the small hall beside the chapel. It smelled like lemon cake and cheap coffee. I was numb. Every time someone offered their condolences, I nodded, thanked them, and drifted away. I overheard him talking to Aunt Lillian, Mom's sister. They were standing by the window, their backs to me. He leaned in close to her and whispered, "She's not doing well. Emotionally, I mean. Very fragile lately. Unstable, honestly." I froze. Unstable? It wasn't just what he said. It was how easily it slipped out of his mouth, how naturally he played the concerned brother. Aunt Lillian put a hand on her chest and looked over at me with a mix of pity and hesitation. I felt something twist in my stomach. I didn't confront him. Not then. Grief makes everything foggy. You second-guess yourself. You try to give people grace. Maybe he meant I was overwhelmed. Maybe he was trying to protect me from questions. I wanted to believe that. A week later, I was still sleeping on the pull-out couch in Mom's old living room, surrounded by boxes of her things. I was sorting through paperwork when I found the will. A photocopy, not the original. I remember reading her handwriting. "To my children, Anna and Mark, I leave the house equally. This home raised you both. May it continue to do so when I'm gone." I took a photo of the page, sent it to Mark with no message. Just that. He didn't reply. The next morning, I drove to the county clerk's office, a growing knot in my chest. Something wasn't right. I waited in line, filled out forms, and asked to see the property deed for 48, Green Hollow Lane. The clerk gave me a blank look, typed something in, and then frowned. "It's under Mark Ellis," she said. "Sole owner. Transferred 3 days ago." My hands went cold. "That can't be right," I whispered. It was our mother's house. She checked again. It was. She added him to the deed a week before she passed. Then he filed a transfer of interest. Fully legal. I stood there, frozen, the room suddenly too bright. My mother was unconscious a week before she died. Barely able to speak. She hadn't signed anything. I was there. Every single day, I drove home in silence. That night, I looked up everything I could on property fraud, on forged signatures, on contesting a deed. And the more I learned, the more my stomach churned. Because if he'd faked it, and I was starting to believe he had, I'd have to prove it. Which meant going to court. Going up against my brother. And showing the world that I was not, in fact, unstable. But then something else happened. The next morning, I found a manila envelope taped to the front door. No return address. Inside. A stack of printed emails. Between my brother and someone named Deborah. The first line read, "She's finally out of the way. You know what to do with the house." I sat down on the front step, shaking. Who was Deborah? And how did this envelope end up here? I wasn't just dealing with betrayal. I was stepping into a war I didn't even know had begun, and I was already losing. Read that email a dozen times before I could breathe again. She's finally out of the way. Those words rang in my ears like a warning bell from inside. A burning house. I couldn't stop staring at the paper, the way it was folded so carefully, the envelope sealed with clean tape like someone wanted me to know, but not trace it back. Deborah.my mother didn't know any Deborah. I was sure of it. I'd handled every visitor, every nurse, every bill in her final months. This wasn't some old family friend. And the way Mark wrote to her, it was casual, familiar. You know what to do with the house. That was a sentence. Full of decisions already made. I started digging. I went through his social media first, nothing. Mark was always careful. Polished. He posted the right things, photos at charity events, suited up at conferences, brunches with faceless colleagues. I looked for Deborah's in his friends list. Nothing obvious. Then I remembered something small. Something stupid. Mom's neighbor once mentioned seeing a woman come by the house while I was out picking up meds. I'd dismissed it. Assumed it was one of the nurses or a delivery mix-up. But what if it wasn't? I walked across the street and knocked on Mrs. Hartley's door. She was in her 70s, always watching the neighborhood like it was a series she couldn't turn off. When she opened the door, she seemed surprised to see me. "I didn't know you were still staying there," she said, glancing toward my mother's house. "I'm cleaning things up," I replied, then asked, "Do you remember that woman you saw here last month? The one who wasn't with the nurses?" She nodded slowly. Blonde, 40-something maybe. Drove a black Audi. Was here for just 15 minutes. I assumed it was family. Did you ever catch her name? She squinted. Debbie? Or Deborah? She answered her phone right before she left. That was the only reason I heard it. My heart skipped. I thanked her, trying not to look too shaken, and walked back to the house. If Deborah had been inside the house, during my mother's final days, and I hadn't let her in, who did? Marked. I confronted him that night. I knew he wouldn't answer the phone, so I went to his place, his clean, cold condo downtown, where everything smelled like aftershave and ambition. He answered the door with a half-smile, like we were siblings catching up over dinner. I didn't even step inside. "You transferred the deed without me." His smile faded, but his tone stayed light. "Mom wanted it that way. You were spiraling. Anna. You forged her signature." He stepped outside, closing the door behind him. "You're upset. I get it. But saying things like that isn't going to help you. You called me unstable. At her funeral." He didn't deny it. Just tilted his head, pretending to be concerned. "You were crying in the bathroom for 20 minutes. People noticed. I was trying to keep them from worrying. I wanted to scream. Instead, I pulled the envelope from my bag and handed it to him." "Who's Deborah?" He looked at it. Blinked. And then he did something I didn't expect. He laughed. "Where did you get this?" "It doesn't matter." He stepped closer. Too close. "You know, Anna, it's really sad. The way you cling to these stories. You're always trying to make yourself the victim. Maybe that's why Mom trusted me with everything in the end. She was tired." He walked back inside without another word. Left me standing in the hallway, heart racing, hands shaking. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and kept hearing him say, "She was tired." Like he was referring to an animal being put down. I needed proof. Real proof, The next morning, I found an old camcorder in one of Mom's boxes. It still had a tape inside, labeled in her handwriting, August, Final Papers. My breath caught. I charged the battery, sat in her old armchair, and pressed play. The video was grainy. Mom sat at the kitchen table, thinner than I remembered, her hands shaking slightly. Mark stood beside her, holding a pen. "This is just routine, Mom," he said. "So the house can be handled cleanly." She looked confused. Tired. I thought. "Anna should," he interrupted, "we already discussed this. You said it was fine." The tape cut off there. Just a flicker of static, but it was enough. She didn't sound sure. She didn't sound like she was giving consent. And I knew, in my gut, that she hadn't. I went to the police. They said it was a civil matter. "Take it to probate court," the officer said, barely glancing at the tape, but before I could even file the paperwork, I came home to find the front door wide open. Nothing stolen. Nothing broken, just a single piece of paper on the kitchen table. A printed photo of me sleeping on the couch, taken from inside the house. I stood there for nearly a full minute, staring at the photo like it might disappear if I blinked. It was me, asleep on the couch, arm thrown over my face, blanket tangled at my feet. The timestamp in the bottom corner was from 2 nights ago. Someone had been in the house while I slept. The silence around me suddenly felt different. Charged. Watching. I checked every lock, every window, even the attic crawlspace. Nothing. No signs of forced entry, no broken glass, not even a footprint. Whoever had done this didn't come to rob me. They wanted me to know they'd been there. My brother's voice echoed in my head. "You're always trying to make yourself the victim." It wasn't just manipulation. It was strategy. Because if I told anyone now, if I went back to the police with a blurry photo and a paranoid story, I'd be confirming his narrative. I was spiraling. I was unstable. I was the grieving daughter who couldn't let go, but I knew what I saw. And I knew I wasn't imagining any of it. I needed help. Not just legal help. Someone outside the family, outside the story. That's when I remembered Elise. She was one of Mom's nurses, the one who stayed late sometimes just to keep her company. She had a quiet strength about her, the kind of woman who didn't scare easily. I found her number in my phone and called. When I told her everything, from the forged deed to the photo, she didn't say I was crazy. She just said, "I'll be there in an hour." She showed up with a notebook and eyes that had seen too much to doubt anything. I showed her the emails, the video of my mother, the photo on the table. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "He didn't do this alone." I nodded. "I think Deborah's more involved than I thought." "Have you looked into her yet?" I hadn't. Not really. I'd been so consumed with proving Mark's betrayal that I hadn't chased the thread. Elise opened her laptop and got to work like it was second nature. She searched property records, business registries, social media. It took 20 minutes to find her. Deborah Collins. 43. Real estate agent. Former paralegal. No criminal record, but she had a reputation for flipping distressed family properties fast and discreetly. Elise clicked on a photo from a charity gala. There she was, standing beside my brother, arm hooked through his, smiling like they were already celebrating. My stomach dropped. They weren't just working together. They were together. I printed everything. Photos, connections, dates. The picture of them at the gala was from 6 months before Mom got sick. This hadn't been a spontaneous betrayal. It was planned. Calculated. And somehow, they had convinced my mother to sign something in her final days, or faked it entirely. I took everything to a lawyer. He was cautious, but curious. He said the video was compelling, but we'd need a handwriting expert, a medical affidavit about my mother's mental state, and, most importantly, access to the original deed. The problem? Mark had it, and I wasn't about to ask him nicely. So I went back to the house. I hadn't slept there since the photo. Elise offered to stay with me. I said yes, though neither of us expected to get much sleep. Around 2 a.m., we heard the back door creaked, we froze, I grabbed my phone, started recording. Elise stood in the hallway, holding a flashlight like a weapon. The sound stopped. Then, footsteps. Quiet, deliberate. Coming from inside, we moved toward the kitchen. The door was still locked. Nothing seemed touched, then Elise gasped. The photo of me on the couch was gone, and in its place, a new one. Me and Elise, standing in the hallway, just minutes earlier, taken from the top of the stairs. The photo was still warm when I picked it up. Like it had just come from a printer. I looked at our faces, frozen in motion, caught off guard. Elise's mouth slightly open, my hand reaching for the light switch. The angle was unmistakable, someone had been on the staircase. Watching us, I didn't know what terrified me more, that someone was in the house right then, or that they could come and go so easily without a trace. Elise scanned the hallway, every nerve in her body alert. We need to call the police. Again. They'll say the same thing, I said, defeated. No break-in, no witness, no threat. Just a woman with grief and paranoia. Then we document everything, she said firmly. Every sound, every shadow, every hour. So we did. For the next 4 nights, Elise and I took shifts sleeping. We installed motion sensors, used an old laptop to monitor the hallway with a webcam, kept a journal of times and noises. For a while, nothing happened. And then, on the 5th night, just before dawn, the webcam caught it. A figure. Moving down the stairs slowly, wearing a hooded sweatshirt. They paused at the foot of the stairs, looked directly into the camera. And smiled. I paused the video there, zooming in on the face. I knew that smile. It was Deborah. I stared at the image for a long time, until the nausea passed. She wasn't just helping Mark with documents or legal maneuvering. She was in this. All the way in. Comfortable enough to walk into the house in the middle of the night. Confident enough to leave photos. Taunting us, Elise leaned over the screen. This isn't just about money. She was right. This had stopped being a property dispute a long time ago. This was psychological warfare. They wanted me to break. They were making sure that if I ever stepped into a courtroom, no one would believe a word I said. I made another appointment with the lawyer. Showed him the video, the photos, everything we had. He nodded slowly, his face darkening. There. Building a case against you, Anna, he said. Not legally, socially. Emotionally. They want people to see you as erratic, emotional, even dangerous. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because deep down, part of me knew it was working. The next day, I got a call from Aunt Lillian. Her voice was soft, hesitant. Anna, honey, Mark came by. He said you've been having some kind of breakdown. I swallowed hard. Did he tell you he forged Mom's deed? She sighed. He said you'd say something like that. He begged us not to take sides. I hung up before I said something cruel. Later that night, Elise sat beside me on the porch. You know what the scariest part of gaslighting is? She said. It's not when they make you doubt the truth. It's when they make everyone else doubt you. I stared out at the empty street, wondering how many neighbors had heard Mark's version. How many saw the lights on in Mom's old house and whispered, she still hasn't moved out. I wasn't just losing the house. I was losing my name, and then, a new blow. A letter arrived, certified mail. From Mark's lawyer. It stated that I was unlawfully occupying property I did not own. That legal proceedings were in motion to have me removed. That any further harassment of Mark or Deborah would be documented and submitted as evidence of emotional instability. I read it out loud to Elise. She said nothing for a moment, then whispered, they're going to have you committed. It sounded dramatic. Paranoid. But as I looked at the letter, the emails, the photos, the pieces lined up. They didn't just want the house. They wanted to erase me from it completely, and if they couldn't do it through the courts, they'd do it through a clinic. I had one option left that night. I went into Mom's room, pulled up the floorboard behind the bed, the spot where she used to keep her old journals and documents. Inside, I found a box I hadn't opened since she passed. At the very bottom, wrapped in plastic, was something I didn't expect. An envelope. Addressed to me, her handwriting. Opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a single letter, written 6 days before she lost consciousness. It began, "Anna, if you're reading this, I need you to know something about Mark." My hands shook as I unfolded the letter. I'd imagined so many things it might say. A mother's blessing. A final goodbye. But what I read wasn't gentle or vague. It was deliberate. A confession written in steady pen strokes, filled with fear and clarity. "Anna, if you're reading this, I need you to know something about Mark. I've been trying to protect both of you in different ways, but I fear now I've only enabled him." She described changes she'd seen in him over the past year. The way he grew distant, dismissive. How he brought a woman, Deborah, to visit once when I wasn't home. Mom had told them she wasn't comfortable with Deborah. She said. Mark grew angry, accused her of favoritism, of never trusting him with anything real. He left in a fury that night. But what scared her most, she wrote, was that 2 weeks later, a notary showed up at the house. A woman. Said Mark had arranged everything. That it was just paperwork to make things easier for the transition. Mom didn't remember signing anything. She couldn't even recall where she had put her own ID afterward. She started hiding things. Notes to herself. Passwords. Names. "I don't trust him," she wrote. "Not anymore. If anything happens to me and the house is only in his name, know that it wasn't my will. I didn't choose that. You both deserve a home." I read the letter 3 times before I could even see why. It was proof. Not legal, maybe, but moral. It confirmed what I already felt in my bones. Mark didn't just take the house. He took our mother's trust and weaponized it. The next morning, I gave the letter to the lawyer. He read it in silence, then looked at me. "We'll need a handwriting analyst. A deposition from Elise. And we'll subpoena the notary records. This changes things." By the end of the week, Mark was served with notice. Not from me, but from the court. A formal challenge to the deed, citing undue influence and forgery. He didn't take it well. He showed up at the house one last time. Not with Deborah. Alone. He looked thinner. Angry, but tired. "You're really doing this?" he asked, standing on the porch where we'd once played with toy dinosaurs as kids. "You already did this," I said. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think a letter from a dying woman is going to beat legal paperwork? I think it's going to make people ask questions. About the timing. About the notary. About why she'd warn me." He stepped closer, lowered his voice. "You always needed everything to be fair, didn't you? Even if it meant torching the whole family." "I didn't torch anything," I said. "You lit the match. I'm just refusing to burn quietly." He left without another word. Weeks passed. Depositions. Paper trails. Experts. Deborah vanished from the equation after her name appeared in the case file. She declined to testify. Mark's lawyer withdrew. Eventually, we reached a settlement. It wasn't perfect. It never is. The house was returned to both our names, but I bought out his half. With money I didn't really have. He walked away with silence and cash. I stayed, not because I wanted the house, but because I wanted to prove I wasn't the person he told everyone I was. The first night alone, I lit a candle in Mom's old room and read her letter again. Not to analyze it. Just to hear her voice in my head. It reminded me that even when she couldn't stop him, she never stopped trying to protect me. The house feels different now. Quieter. Honest. I tell this story not for sympathy, but because someone out there is being made to feel like they're crazy. Like grief makes them unreliable. Like silence is easier. It isn't say the thing out loud, let them call you unstable, then show them what the truth looks like when it finally finds its voice.